I'm literally looking at myself at the moment.
Time is unfaithful for those
Teacher,
who
I'm
abuse
literally
it.
looking at myself at the moment.
Time is unfaithful for
Teacher,
those who
I'm
abuse
literally
it.
looking at myself at the
The
moment.
lotto is not gambling. The lotto is a tradition. It's an Italian tradition.
Teacher?
Hello, and welcome to another episode of It's Time to Rewind, a podcast stuck in its own time loop right along with the movies we discuss. In this season, we're taking a look at Triangle Time Loop. I am your host, Bubbawheat from Flights, Tights, and Movie Nights, and in this episode, we are discussing the first loop in Time Loop that starts at 4 minutes and 36 seconds, with a small pig appearing in the lab, and ends at 21 minutes and 28 seconds, with Ricky's father pushing him into the machine. Once again, joining me is Brian Boucher from Top Gun Minute. How are you doing today?
I'm Bill. I'm well.
All right. Well, we already discussed, your thoughts about the movie as a whole. So let's go ahead and jump straight into this first loop because we got a lot to cover here in this first loop because it sets up a lot of different things. So this starts out with this little pig, appearing seemingly out of nowhere. I can't tell if it's like an actual Vietnamese potbelly pig, the type that they use as pets, or if it's just a standard like farm piglet.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, but it's cute. It's a very very cute little pig. At points in my life, I thought, having a little potbelly pig for a pet would be pretty cool. So yeah.
Yeah, my wife has also at various points brought up the idea of looking up a potbelly pig for a pet as well, with a lot of luckily neither one of us have a problem with popping our peas with those sentences,
right? Yeah.
At least hopefully not. And the father says that the piglet's name is Chicha.
Right.
And I was curious if that meant something in Italian, but I couldn't find anything.
Mm.
In Spanish, chicha means corn, but that was kind of the closest I could find, unless it's spelled a way that I was not spelling correctly.
Yeah, as long as it doesn't spell bacon, I guess we're good.
Very early on, right here in this moment, as the dad asks Ricky to walk away, to put the piglet back in the paddock. And then we see it's, a very, very quick shot as he's walking out the door. We see the father, he has, a surprised expression and then goes quickly off screen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you remember if you noticed that moment the first time you watched it?
Yeah, I did. And the reason why is because I am a very big fan of time loop movies, like Groundhog Day.
Live, Die, Repeat.
Live, Die, Repeat. Yeah, those types of movies. Back to the Future is my favorite time travel movie, and I'm especially with Back to the Future, where they have all the payoffs in it. And
I think Back to the Future 2 is really where they have the closer to the time loop elements, since there are like two Martys in the scene in the second film. Right.
Yeah, but so I'm watching this and I'm like, my brain is just programmed to, when I'm watching a time travel movie or a time loop movie, to just focus in on every single thing that you see, because there's probably going to be some type of payoff from it later on.
Yeah.
So I did catch a little reaction shot the first time I did see it.
Yeah, we are going to be discussing spoilers here. So that is the moment where the father sees, I believe it would be Ricky 2, either Ricky 2 or Ricky 3, coming through the time, the time portal. And so he's running off to deal with future Ricky, which of course we don't see any of that. Instead, we get this, this establishing shot of this gorgeous Italian village of Cancellara in in the province of Basilicata in Italy. And just this gorgeous little village that's where basically like all the buildings are kind of stacked on top of each other, almost like a miniature Minas Tirith from Lord of the Rings.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's what I was thinking. The Lord of the Rings or like Hogwarts and Harry Potter. You know, just all the mountains and the hillside around the building. You know, around this village it's beautiful.
Yeah, and all the buildings in the all the houses in the village are all basically kind of connected to each other, and it's like you have this mass of buildings and roads, and then it's just surrounded by countryside, and like outside of this mass of houses, there's like practically nothing except for just a few small scattered houses and farms. It's a gorgeous looking village and establishing shot. And then we get Sam heading over to the paddock where he sees another chicha, which at this point he doesn't think that it's another chicha. He thinks that he's seen the one and only chicha piglet, and he thinks that his father, that this is some other pig that just happens to look like chicha.
Yeah. And because the one he's holding in his hand, Chicha, has a collar or some kind of ribbon around its neck, and the one in the paddock does not.
Yeah, and then of course we get another instance of slight foreshadowing because he turns around and he sees just the back of his father running off, and again I believe this is when the father was trying to prove to himself that the time machine worked, and he's seeing the one Ricky, and then he's going to check to make sure that the other Ricky is still there. So that's like his confirmation that there are actually two Rickies at this point in the future loop.
Yeah.
If we get this very quick scene of him being scared of the Scarecrow for a moment, and again setting up the Scarecrow as it plays an important part later in the film.
Right.
And then he comes back and talks to his dad, and at this point, you can tell, I think even the first time watching it, that the mood of the father is very different. And at this point, he has already talked with a future Ricky, and everything that he's doing right now, for the most part, is just trying to get rid of Ricky 1 so that he can deal with the future Rickies.
Yeah.
And we get another moment of the machine flickering off. Although, again, we do kind of get a more or less clear view of the machine shortly afterwards. And it is kind of out in the open. So, I don't remember if that's another instance of like a Ricky, of either Ricky 3 or 4 coming through the time portal. But it seems like it goes pretty quickly. I don't think that every time that the machine shuts off is another time loop instance. There's just a few of them. I think it's very subtle, but you can see the father kind of messing with Chicha as the piglet is in this little plastic tub. And it doesn't seem like anything the first time you're watching it, but after you've seen the movie, you realize that what he's doing is he's actually looking at Chicha's collar to see the lucky numbers written on the inside of that ribbon.
Yep.
Which, again, that sets up this whole lottery subplot. I think it's another slight failing of the movie, because it is kind of what everybody thinks of whenever you involve time travel. I mean, it was the whole reason for Back to the Future 2 was basically that.
Right.
Just going back in time and using your future knowledge to make yourself money.
Right.
But in this film, it doesn't really have a payoff. It's just it just kind of exists in the background.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's kind of a thing. What would you do if you could go back in time, just a week or 2 weeks or, whenever, like that's a big thing that people think about is, oh, I'll just get this week's lottery numbers and go back and buy a ticket, that way I can be rich at at this point in time. But in here, he's talking about it's almost it came out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
The numbers like.
Yeah, he's like, here, I've got some lucky numbers. Why don't you go play them for me?
Yeah, and he says it's he's like, Ricky's saying, why are you thinking about the lottery right now? We're in the middle of something. He says he wants to check the machine and the stuff by himself. He wants to be alone,
Mm-hmm.
and this is his way of getting him out of the workshop.
Yeah,
and
it's like doing double duty. It's getting Ricky 1 out of the workshop for an hour or so, but again, this like secondary plot, because I think it's hard to read from the film because it focuses so much on the time loop mechanics. But I think that there's like a secondary plot where risking losing funding. I believe that's what the French therapist is there to find out whether or not he's crazy or if his work has some merit, which I think that's tied to whether or not they continue to get funding. And so I think that this lotto ploy is also just a secondary thing in order to fund their research.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't think that concept is explained very well. I think it's just kind of shoved under the rug and just kind of shoved into this movie.
Yeah. And I like how the way he convinces him to do it because he says it's tradition. It's an Italian tradition. So it's like everybody plays the lottery. So it's just, that's his way of like, oh, okay, well, yeah, you're right. That's what we do. So let's do that.
And I did actually do a little bit of research into the Italian lottery, since he did say it's an Italian tradition. And the first Italian lottery where tickets were purchased for money is often said to take place in Florence in 1530.
Wow.
And the way that these lotteries worked, it was fairly straightforward. They actually had these 2 large urns. And in one urn, they have, the slips with either the person's name or some identifiable motto that they would put into that urn. And then in the other urn, they would put a corresponding either a blank slip or a patientia, which means patience. And they would have a few, a much smaller number of slips that had the word prezio for prize. And then they would also list what the specific prize would be. And so they would have these 2 urns that were filled with these slips. And the tickets were drawn simultaneously from both urns. So they would pick, one slip with the name and then one slip from basically the prize urn. From the information that I saw, the draw could last up to 11 days for some, of the bigger events, because they have to pick out every single slip of paper and in the urns.
Oh wow.
To make sure that they don't miss any prize.
Huh. That's interesting.
And then it's, the more modern lotto, the Italian lotto, the Super Enlato, started in 1997. In this version, they have several different local lotteries that take place in different cities. And then the Super Lotto, they actually pull like the first number from each of the biggest, like the 5 biggest cities.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can play like the local lotto, or you can play the Super Lotto. And they pick 5 numbers between 1 and 90. And it's basically, the same as the typical US lotto, where, I didn't look it up to see if they have like the the ping pong balls. But I wouldn't be surprised if that's basically what they do with that.
Mm.
And so, the father finally convinces Ricky to leave, and they have this discussion about his Vespa that he restored, this classic Vespa. So, do you know anything about Vespas?
Yeah, I looked it up. I think it said it was made in like in 1940, I believe.
Yeah, it was during World War II.
Yeah.
The first one was made in like 44 or 45. The company was actually fully established in 1946.
Yeah, and I know you can watch as many documentaries or movies that are in, about Italy or, and Italians, and they're everywhere. It's like a major mode of transportation. So.
And the first Vespa, they said it was actually made from spare aircraft parts that were actual landing pieces and like landing gears from Mussolini's airplanes, and it was designed by Corradino Descanio. And because of the unique design and especially how the front handlebars looked, as well as its sound, they thought that it sounded like a wasp. And so they named it the Italian word for wasp, which is Vespa.
Huh.
And so we get Vespa journey into the village and, some more establishing shots as well as some more credits coming up over his journey. And we get a few more, shots of things like the horse, which comes into play a little bit later. I feel like I have a false memory, like one of those Mandela effects, where after I hadn't seen this movie for a few months, I had somehow gotten this false memory that at one point in time in the movie, Ricky actually is riding the horse at some point, which I don't believe that happens.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, which I haven't. I watched it the one time a couple months ago. I haven't watched it since. I mean, I watched these clips that you sent me, but I didn't rewatch the movie again. So I don't believe there's a horse, him riding it, but
yeah, the horse it just startles him again later in the movie, and that's what causes him getting hit by this car that we see. That that this is another moment where the film doesn't show us everything, because we see the car and he almost gets, the car stops quickly, and then he just kind of barely looks back and we don't really see it, and he says sorry, and that's actually the car with the French doctor, Dr. Bijou,
right? And
she stopped because she actually hit future Ricky,
right?
But of course, the movie isn't ready to show us that yet.
Right.
So instead, and there is this moment, it has, like right before the title card comes up, we see the glitching, and the glitching does back up a couple seconds. In order to show that, this movie called Time Loop is going to have some time travel in it.
Yeah. Which I thought, when I first watched it, like I said earlier about trying to pay attention to every single thing, well, I noticed that little glitch where, it backed up, and I thought, whoa, but is this another time loop? Is this a different version of Ricky that we're seeing drive into town? So I was really trying to pay attention to that.
Yeah, we get Ricky coming into town, and we get him, talking to Olivia, his not yet girlfriend. And this is another Italian actress, and I think she works well enough. She's not really given a whole lot to do. She's just kind of there to interact with Sam a couple times.
Yeah, she seemed very smitten with him.
Yeah, I think that worked pretty well. And then we get this phone call, this video call, that he thinks it's with his dad, and of course we find out later that that's actually Ricky 2 trying to call him. And then his dad quickly interferes, and he's like, no, I'm just playing around.
Take care of my Vespa.
Yeah, and I will say, I'm pretty sure I remember this moment in the first time I watched this film, and that one was not like, I didn't think, I mean, I thought that was weird, but I didn't think that phone call specifically involved future Rickies yet.
Right. Yeah, I was the same way.
And I also think it's funny that, Ricky says to Olivia's brother, "Nice hat." Because this is the hat that Ricky 4 will eventually be wearing.
Yeah.
And that's another detail that I didn't even notice until starting to look at it more into this, digging into this specific loop.
Mm.
And then after that, we have Ricky, we get this shot of this guy playing guitar very nicely, and we have Dr. Bijou, which she has not been introduced yet, sitting down, just taking notes in her journal. And Ricky parks the Vespa and takes a brief video of this guitarist, and his name is Antonio Agrusta, and he just seems like a local musician that they pulled for this movie to play guitar. He doesn't really have a whole lot of credits outside of like a YouTube channel where he has himself and his band playing gigs.
Yeah, he's really good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I liked how that at the end of the scene where he's driving away on his Vespa, and you see Olivia from inside the restaurant or little shop that they're in, and that's where it starts, and you see her face as he's driving by, and she's got this big huge smile,
Mm-hmm.
And then it cuts to the guy on the guitar. I thought that was a really cool transition also.
Yeah, I like that as well. And like you said, the actress playing Olivia, she really, in such a short period of time, really does show that she's smitten with this guy who's not willing to call her his girlfriend yet.
Right.
He goes into this, I guess, a multi-purpose coffee house. I hadn't actually thought about it. If there's anything else, we see a bunch of jars on this glass shelf, and I'm guessing it is mostly just a coffee house, but this is also where you go to turn in your lottery numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is where we get this description of La Smorfia. And this is this book that is, he calls it this Neapolitan tradition. And this is something that's used kind of almost like in America with horoscopes. It's kind of similar to that. Mm-hmm. But it's where they analyze dreams in order to convert their dreams into numbers to play in the lotto. And this is something that's popular across Italy. And many people use this method in order to figure out what numbers to play. Mm. And, every number 1 through 90 has at least one. I think there might be multiple interpretations depending on what version of the book you're looking at. To me, that seems like it's a pretty thick book. So I'm guessing that for each of these, it probably goes into the reasons why this is matched to this specific number.
Yeah, like a different chapter for every number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, the name La Smorfia, it actually comes from the Greek god of dreams, Morpheus. And we get to see very clearly the actual lucky numbers. And the numbers that he chose are 4, 23, 20, 9, and 53. And Mario, the shopkeeper, he starts to go through them, and the first number 4, it corresponds to pig. Mm-hmm. And of course, Ricky's like, a pig did show up in our lab yesterday. And I thought that was interesting that he said yesterday, because it did throw me off on the timeline of this movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same here.
Because I thought that he was referring to the pig that showed up in the lab, but that wasn't yesterday. That was just
Yeah, 30 minutes ago.
yeah. And then I thought maybe he was talking about the original Chicha, and maybe like the original Chicha also showed up yesterday in the lab.
Right.
Which that would be kind of a weird occurrence, but I kind of think that maybe that was just like a mistake
Right.
in the film.
Yeah, maybe they shot this part first, and when they were still trying to figure out the timeline part, and then so that was what was in the script, and then they just didn't catch it when they edited it together.
Yeah, because we haven't talked about this yet, but the time loop sends him back in time. I believe it was 65 minutes, so like just over an hour.
Right.
So basically, this entire film takes place over the course of, well, we see it at the end, so maybe
Yeah.
I'll wait to say exactly when, but I think like less than an hour and a half.
Yeah, but it's kind of hard to tell because it starts out it's pretty daylight, and then at the end it is just turning nighttime.
Yeah, it's pretty dark by the end of the day, but I might look into it a bit later to see what time sundown would be. But I think that it's not too much of a stretch to think that the way they have the time, that it actually lines up with, they would be light, towards the end of the day, at the start of, this hour and a half, and then it would be dark by the end of it.
Right.
And then, the second number 23 is La Idiota, or the idiot. And the page that I looked up, it just mentions that it's stupid for that number. And then before he gets to the rest of the numbers, Ricky hears the Vespa engine running outside and runs off to see it drive off, apparently stolen. And again, we don't see who's actually driving the Vespa, but I know for sure whenever I first watched this movie that my immediate thought was, that's future Ricky driving off in that Vespa.
Yes. Yeah, same here.
I mean, you have a movie called Time Loop. I think it's pretty clear the direction that they're going. It's not just going to be some random person stealing his Vespa.
Right.
And that was even something that I might get into it a little bit later, but I started getting a little frustrated. Like I'd say like by the third loop, where in the third loop he still thinks that it's somebody else that stole his Vespa.
Right. Yeah. And especially when I believe at that point he sees himself himself stealing the Vespa, and he sees himself coming out of the little shop at the same time, and who else would be stealing his Vespa? It's obvious it's going to be him.
Yeah, and it's not really until he becomes Ricky 4 that he finally has everything put all together and knows what's going on.
Yeah.
But so we don't get to hear what the rest of these lucky numbers mean, but I did look them up because there is like an Italian lotto like information page. And so the other numbers, number 20, its meaning is party. That doesn't really make sense in the context of this film.
Right.
And 9 corresponds to Pharaoh, which is a litter of pigs, which, I mean, I guess in a stretch you could consider, the fact that there's 2 chichas that makes up a very small litter of pigs. And 53 is old man, which that could refer to the father.
Right.
But I almost think that it could kind of be tied to the movie itself, because, it starts with the pig, and then the idiot Ricky, and then this whole movie is considered this party that happens. Because, I mean, you could even say it's almost like a party of Rickies, because you have 4 Rickies running around this village all at the same time.
Right.
And maybe it's a stretch, but you could call them kind of a litter of pigs. That it goes from 1 pig to these 4 Rickies, and then it ends in the old man, his father.
Right.
But yeah, and then afterwards, the Vespa runs off and he yells and he tries to call his father, but the line is busy. And I do think that the timing works out, that this is when I think Ricky 3 is calling his father and he's saying, yeah, I'm looking at myself right now.
Right. Yeah, because he's just off camera.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then we get the audience's introduction to Dr. Bijou, or Dijou. Mm-hmm. And she says that she knows Ricky's father, and most importantly, knows that he's not crazy.
Right.
And I think that's important because, from her perspective, she just had a conversation with Ricky 4, and he let her know that, she's about to see multiple Rickies. And she did just see multiple Rickies.
Right.
And so now she's walking up to Ricky number 1, which I'm not sure if she knows that this is the first Ricky, but she knows that it's an earlier version of Ricky. But she does know that he's not crazy, because this is like the confirmation that this actually works, and she's willing to help him and give him a ride home, since quote unquote somebody stole his Vespa.
Right.
And then we just get a little bit of conversation between them. She talks about knowing his father's research. I think it's funny on the car ride that she asks if Ricky thinks his father's going to be upset about the Vespa being stolen, and Ricky says, I'm not afraid that he'll be upset. I'm afraid that he'll be mad.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of a funny turn of phrase that, for me, I don't really see the difference between those 2 words that much.
Right, yeah, same here.
And then we get this, I think this is really the first time in the movie that we get any sort of discussion about what they're trying to accomplish, where Dr. Dijou mentions the ether and Tesla.
Uh-huh.
And so I did look up a little bit about that, and Tesla had this belief that the Earth has this like fluid electrical charges running beneath its surface that's also known as ether, and that he thought that there was a way that you could tap into this ether that would create basically limitless energy.
Right.
Have you heard about that theory at all?
A little bit, yes.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, although it's basically kind of fallen out of favor in more modern physics, that people don't really believe that anymore. And then, after this conversation, Ricky heads back into the lab. We get to see the Scarecrow again, which I think looks absolutely nothing like Ricky's father.
Right.
Which I'm glad that they do kind of call that out at some point. And Ricky walks in, and I think it's interesting that we do get this close-up of his shirt, his like plaid shirt draped over the chair. Mm-hmm. And we don't really comment on it. And I think it's also kind of hard to see. So if you're first watching it, you might not realize the implication. But that's like where I think Ricky 3 changes out of the plaid shirt into the gray t-shirt.
Right. Yeah. And I also like when he's walking up to the garage, he goes and knocks on the door, which I thought was weird because when you just walk in, but the lights flicker, and he notices it. Mm-hmm. And then he goes over and just opens the door. Yeah. And it comes into play later on. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And then we get this our first look of this this diagram, which basically explains the time travel, and we have this nicely drawn, which at this point I believe the time would be like 6:53 p.m., where it's just before the nicely drawn Ricky 1 is about to go back 65 minutes and become Ricky 2. And then we have Ricky's crudely drawn, pig in red. So we can see that the time starts at 5:30 and then ends at, I think, 7:25.
So 2 hours. Yeah. I like how they use it's kind of the Doc Brown diagram, from Back to the Future 2, so when Doc is explaining to Marty how time travel works and goes into tangents and...
Yeah, I'm sorry for the crudeness of the models.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so and we do also see like the little tombstone right before the 7:25. And we have the the drawing of the Vespa in there as well. Ricky 2 to 3 is in green. And of course the only thing missing, because he never draws this, is going from Ricky 3 to 4. Because by the time he gets to his fourth loop, then he's basically fully understanding of the entire time loop, and he's just more or less running on autopilot on that point. And again, I think, and I'll probably get into it whenever I'm discussing that specific loop in detail, but that at that point, again, he no longer has free will, because he has already seen the events happen 3 times. And so if there was like any amount of free will left, by the time he's in the 4th loop, I think it is basically him just running on autopilot, because he's doing what he knows has already happened and what has to be done.
Right.
I really enjoy that concept of time travel, where, again, it's fate. This is something that was destined to happen, because we have these events, because the things that this first Ricky has done, he would not have done had future Ricky not intervened.
Right.
And so it's really hard to wrap your head around like what you're able to do whenever it's like something that's already happened. Because it's almost like all of this has already happened, or it's something that is destined to happen, because there's no way, because there's no causality, because everything causes itself.
Right.
And that's just, it's like one of those, it eliminates the paradox situation, because everything that is going to happen has already happened, and it will already happen. But it also causes into question the causality, like what caused all of this to happen. Yeah,
I would agree.
Is there anything else that, like, is that too much to wrap your head around? Like, do you have any thoughts about this, like, this fatalistic concept of time travel?
Well, I mean, it's like, it has to have already happened. And like I said, when he gets to, Ricky 3 and Ricky 4, it's almost like the Vanilla Sky, or the butterfly effect type thing. If he doesn't get to a certain point and do this certain thing, then Ricky 1 is going to do something else, and it's going to screw everything up. So he's really on point about what he needs to do to keep it all on track, or, it's going to cause a paradox in which it does not, which I thought was really, really cool. I really like that fact.
This scene ends with another one of those expositional speeches by his father, and again, this is something where, I've watched it a few times, and I still can't really tell you what he's talking about. You know, again, with his accents and what he's talking about, I kind of just tune this part out.
Yeah. No, and Ricky is trying to. It's like he's trying to talk to him, like he's asking him why he's talking like this and stuff, and it's like it's almost like he's not paying attention to Ricky. You know, he's just talking to himself. You know, and with Ricky being back there asking questions, it makes it, like I said, it's very much more confusing, you know, as to what he is really ranting about. And then, of course, with the effect of the machine, with the waviness and the time, the delays and the sound and the video. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes it really hard to understand. But I do like how it transitions to where it's like, where you're not behind the
yeah, it kind of jumps back and forth. Like sometimes it'll be behind the machine, so you get the time dilation, and then like it, you know, the first time it jumps, it actually has like, you know, a half second of black screen before the camera jumps to being in front of the time machine. Right. So we don't have the time dilation effects. It is just hard to follow because of everything that the father is saying. It is kind of interesting to think about this in terms of the movie, because you know that the father is in a different place, and it's almost like he's struggling with what he has to do, because he knows that he has to get Ricky into this time machine, because he doesn't think that Ricky's going to do it on his own, because it's something that's already happened, and he's just trying to explain to Ricky 1 what's happening or what's going to happen. But because Ricky and the audience hasn't gone through it yet, it's just difficult to follow.
Yeah. And
I think even on multiple viewings, it's difficult to follow, and I can't really explain it. And you know, unfortunately, I didn't. I guess maybe I didn't give this enough time on my own in order to dig into it and see if I could pull anything useful or interesting about what he's going on about.
Yeah. The only thing I could really compare it to is kind of like The Force Awakens, when Kylo Ren when he's with Han Solo on the bridge, and you know, he's like, I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I can do it, you know, type of thing. And it's almost like this is what Kylo Ren would be thinking about in his head. You know, yeah, he's got to figure out a way to do it, so he's just going to ramble on, and then he finally pulls him close enough, and then throws him through the loop into the machine. Because he knows if he doesn't do it, then it's going to cause a paradox. Mm-hmm. But he doesn't want to do it because he knows their consequences could be disastrous, you know, as Doc Brown would say. So.
Yeah. All right, well, I think that wraps up this first loop in Time Loop, and you know, we still got 3 more loops to go. But it's I think it was interesting to dive into this this loop that sets up all the future ones. And again, I'd like to thank you for joining me on these first 2 episodes of this second portion of this Recursion season. Yeah. And once again, if you take a moment to let everybody know where they can find you online.
Sure. Well, first off, thanks, Bubbawheat, for having me. It's been always a pleasure talking to you. But yeah, you can find me Top Gun Minute on all your favorite podcatchers, and on Facebook at Top Gun Minute Pod, or on Twitter at Top Gun Minute Pod, and Facebook at Top Gun Minute Listener School.
Right. And as always, I am Bubbawheat, and you can find me on Twitter where I'm at Bubbawheat. You can find this show, It's Time to Rewind, on Anchor.fm, as well as anywhere else that you listen to podcasts. And we also have a Facebook group, It's Time to Rewind, a time loop group, where you can join and discuss podcast episodes as they come out, as well as anything about time loop movies, TV shows, or if you yourself happen to be stuck in a time loop. And we did have one person to claim that early on. And until next time.
I'm literally looking at myself in money.
Time is unfaithful for those
Teacher,
who
I'm
abuse
literally
it.
looking at myself in money.
Time is unfaithful for
Teacher,
those who
I'm
abuse
literally
it.
looking at myself in
The
money.
lotto is not gambling. The lotto is a tradition. It's an Italian
Myself in
tradition.
money. Teacher,